It's a joy to be here on stage today. We have an absolutely phenomenal success story to share with you. And Cadbury's creative platform is all about generosity. And Gemma and Gethin today are going to be very generous in what they're sharing with you. So this isn't just saying what their story is, they're going to reveal how they've got there. So I think at the end of this, you'll go away with some really clear tips that you can apply to build predisposition. So if you're sitting there thinking, I'm not Cadbury, I'm not chocolate, they have an advantage, don't they? This isn't going to work for me. Stop. I don't care if you're a bank, if you're in travel and tourism, if you're a vaginal lubricant, you can go away and you can apply this. You're laughing. If you haven't seen their ads for Replens, they are amazing. You need to look them up. So after brand size, creative quality is the number one driver of profitability of advertising. And what's so powerful is this is something that you can influence, you can control. So anyway, enough from me. Let's listen to the audience that matters most.
The Cadbury's ads have been some of the best pieces of communication that I've ever seen in my life, and I always remember them, even if I go back to my childhood to the current ones that I have seen, including the Christmas ones. I remember them and they always have a special place in my heart.
The main themes, I'd say, is about connection with family and being involved and everyone having a moment. So it makes you just try to feel special and that everyone's included, I suppose.
It is just a really nice feeling. It has nice connotations around it.
For me, Cadbury's has been a brand that has consistently brought people together. That's been the overarching theme. It's a brand that people know and love, and it's been in our lives forever and ever.
The adverts are always really sophisticatedly clever, but not in a way that you can't follow. So I always think that's really good.
And then the voiceover says, there's a glass and a half in every one. And that's basically saying there's heart in Cadbury's chocolate. It's not about a glass of milk, it's about heart. A heart and a half in every one.
But I'm sure you're sitting there thinking, I want that in my brand, but let's explore how you can get it. And thanks to our qualitative team for pulling that video together. I think what shines through for me from that is it shows what a brand really is. It's not just a set of distinctive assets. It's all of those thoughts, associations, those feelings that are in people's heads. And that's essentially what predisposition is all about. And we've seen, Cadbury is really part of the cultural fabric of our society. So brand predisposition, as Jane was sharing with us earlier, is built upon having a brand that's meaningful, a brand that's different, and a brand that's salient, so a brand that comes to mind really easily. And what we're looking to do is to shape those associations. And it's key to the future of your brand. So as Jane was intimating earlier, brands that have stronger predisposition have stronger sales today, and they have stronger future sales as well. So Cadbury's marketing has been absolutely brilliant at building predisposition, which is why we're showcasing them as such a strong example today. And at Kantar, we're really proud to have played a role as on the team. So if you don't believe my personal enthusiasm, for those of you that need numbers to have a convincing story, I have some amazing ones for you. So annual retail sales are up 41%. From 2017 to 2023. Demand power, which is essentially brand predisposition, up 85% over the same time period. And brand Z valuation from Kantar is up 51%. So what's really powerful here is this isn't a one-hit wonder. This is about consistency. So I like to think of the team as the athletes of the advertising world. They keep coming out and hitting out of the park, which is absolutely amazing. So we've got 3 things to share with you today. If you know me at all, you'll know there can only be 3 and no more. So let's get started. Looking first of all at how you can link into those existing associations as a springboard for your success. So Gemma, big year this year. It was your birthday, or Cadbury's birthday, a few days ago. So you've been building predisposition for 200 years. How do you keep that torch alive? How do you ensure you're maintaining that relevance today and tomorrow, as Anna was talking about? That's so important, isn't it?
Yeah, thanks, Lynn. And hopefully all of you are enjoying your Cadbury Dairy Milk, so our job becomes much easier, because even if you don't listen to anything we say, you'll be having a nice time eating the chocolate. But to answer your question, Lynn, back in 2017, when the team were looking at repositioning the brand, it was really a real moment for us to actually go back in our history and back to our roots and really understand where Cadbury had come from and where all the associations that consumers have with Cadbury have come from. That was really important in terms of setting the right vision and the foundations for then making sure that the way that we took the brand forward into the future was really relevant. We're lucky in Cadbury to have a book that's written about our history and even an archive, which you can see on the right-hand side of the slide, and a small team of archivists who were really able to help us bring the history of Cadbury to life and bring real colour to the values that the brand has been founded on. Appreciate that not everybody, with the possible exception of Guinness, have an archive in their company armoury, but everyone will have a founding story and will have a start point for the brand, and understanding that and the associations that your consumers have with you from there is really important in then setting the meaningful difference that your brand can stand for going forward. But for us, our history started back in 1824 when John Cadbury opened a shop on Ball Street in Birmingham. He was selling cocoa as a drink that was an alternative to the alcohol that was really prevalent at the time, that everyone was drinking and causing all sorts of havoc and problem in society because of that. So based on his Quaker values, he offered cocoa as an alternative to help improve society. Following the success of how well that shop did and how well the company is evolving, his sons, Richard and George, then took over the business and actually moved the manufacturing site out of the slums of Birmingham and out into the countryside and founded Bourneville, which is known as the factory in the garden. And with that, they provided really amazing quality of life, a measurable improvement in the quality of life for their workers. They instilled a 5.5-day working week when everyone else is on 7. They put in sports facilities like swimming baths and cricket pitches for the workers and gave them paid time off to use them. And even when it came to the product, they really thought about how they could bring through the generosity, and they put not just a glass, but a glass and a half of milk in every bar of Cadbury Dairy Milk. So it's clear that it's a company that was founded on going the extra mile, that it has really generous principles as its foundation. And that was a really good way for us to start thinking about how we could use it as a strong springboard for bringing out our meaningful difference. But if you can't make it relevant to today's consumer, then that generous past stays just as that. It's just part of your company history. So the unlock for the team who was working on the repositioning was really to understand that it's not relevant just to talk about our own company internal history and our own internal generosity, but really that there's generosity in all of us, that there's an instinct to be generous that exists with everyone, and it's a really deep human truth. And that is something that's then taking that reframe from thinking about how we just apply the generosity that we had in our past to us, to actually what's relevant to people today, was a really big unlocker and got us to the line of there's actually a glass and a half in everyone, which is now the North Star in everything that we do, and then particularly in our communications, how we show up those everyday acts of generosity. It's also been something then that reframe from just thinking about ourselves and how we talk about ourselves to thinking about people has been really important in then how we celebrate our 200th birthday. So it was really important for us when thinking about even if to celebrate 200 years, that it wasn't something that was just talking about ourselves to ourselves and talking about a big number. It was really the opportunity to celebrate the special relationships that the British public have with this brand, and really recognising the fact that we wouldn't be here today, obviously, without consumers. So in the words of the campaign, it wasn't just about, it's not about us, it's about being essentially a brand that's been theirs for 200 years or yours for 200 years. And all of the photos that you see there are real photos that consumers have sent us in, that we've been able to use across the campaign, that really show the significance of the brand in people's lives. So it's generosity then has given us that real strong foundation from which to build our meaningful difference. It's a value that's Been relevant 200 years ago, relevant today, and we are very much hoping will continue to be relevant for the next 200 years.
Thanks, Gemma. So distinctive assets, Gethin, are a key part of what you've done and part of driving your success. They can support your branding and your advertising, but they're not the only thing. How do you keep those relevant in the same way as you keep the brand relevant and give them a greater depth of meaning?
Yeah, I think so. Cadbury are really fortunate to have a handful of really strong distinctive assets. The glass and a half, it's iconic. It's something that's instantly recognisable by a big chunk of the country, and it's synonymous with Cadbury. When they see the glass and a half, especially in purple, they immediately get to Cadbury. I think one of the things that marketers maybe underestimate is how long it takes to get there. Cadbury has drummed away at glass and a half for decades in a very consistent way. And really, we are the beneficiaries. I think we talked about standing on the shoulders of giants as well. We're the beneficiaries of a lot of that work that has gone in. And actually, I think one of the strands of work we've done as part of 200 years is given us an opportunity to almost go back to how Cadbury used to use the glass and a half, almost as that very literal product promise, the glass and a half of milk in every, back at the beginning, £0.5 bar of chocolate. We don't talk in pounds anymore. But, to go back to that and as part of the 200 years campaign. So one of the things that we did was bring back historic packaging, old, nostalgic packaging that everyone has a different relationship with. Depending on your age, there's probably different versions of that bar and that design that you have a fondness for. So, for me, it's the bar from the 80s. For my dad, it's the bar from the 60s. And as a set, there's something that's kind of interesting in all of it and that people sort of gravitate towards. To promote it, we then went back to and just started to use the glass and a half in that traditional iconic sense, that product promise. And, each one of these ads is based on the advertising style of the day, and there's a lot of craft and technique into whether it's lino cut or acrylic or watercolour, but the glass and a half is the thing that's common. Whatever, for all of those changes, there's a lot of consistency in that usage. But I think the thing with the glass and a half, as Gemma's touched on, is it's come to mean more for us as a business and as a brand. So we've kind of moved the meaning from just specifically a product promise to something that is more about the emotional feeling. And I think the parallels to Guinness here are really strong. So the taste and quality is what glass and a half did for years. They had the glass and a half of milk. They talked about it's the glass and a half that makes the taste and a half. What we've added is the emotion to that, I think now. So one of the things I think, that can be hard on that is when you've inherited something, you've used it so much, it becomes part of the furniture, and you get a bit constrained in what you think you can do with it. It's only a symbol for the product, for the promise, and not seeing it go beyond that. So I think for us, one of the things that was really important was when we got to this new territory around generosity, not about us, about consumers and about their lives, and these very, I think, purpose from the small P, so small moments with big emotional impact. Summarising that in a line that feels very branded, so the glass and a half in everyone, was just a really useful way to tie it all together at the end of communication. And I love the lady at the end in the thing talking about the heart and a half. I couldn't have said it better myself with what that is really about. And so I think we're going to show how we use it within a big execution as part of 200 years, which takes the glass and a half sentiment into that campaign.
Yeah, brilliant. So you've got strong foundations you've talked about in terms of your strategy and your vision for the brand and real clarity around what your distinctive assets are. But then, of course, you don't want that to exist in a drawer. You've got to bring it to life in a way that really connects and links with your audience and, of course, with your brand. So we have an ad that does that on steroids here to share with you now, and this is as good as it gets. This ad is really meaningful to me personally. I'm a single mum. I have 2 young boys, and they did this, or something like this, when they were 5 and 8 for me, and the lady in Tesco got very emotional about it. So let's have a look.
Sorry. Come on.
I'd like a bar of chocolate, please. It's for my mum. Your change.
Happy birthday, Mum.
There's always been a glass and a half in everyone.
So you can see here the emotive response. So this is using our facial coding approach, and you can have a go later in the ignition area if you want to. But what you can see are the smiles that are showing on people's faces. And you can see a really emotive arc and narrative, and Cadbury being very central to those key moments and building to that climax of those two key moments of generosity that we've seen. So Gethin, it's really interesting. I love here that you're tapping into universal truths, but they're anything but boring or ordinary. They're instantly meaningful, and I'm sure I could see on some of your faces you feeling that as you watch that film go by. How do you ensure that you get that right and that they're not just moments that resonate with you as a team?
There's something sort of almost paradoxical about how we actually work on this, which is we're absolutely looking for universal, timeless truths and stories, but we don't get there by asking creative teams to write something universal and timeless, because that is almost code for write something boring and anodyne and it summarizes everything into something that's very trite and doesn't reflect reality. So Mum's Birthday actually started as a story from Chris Birch, who's our executive creative director. He was a creative back then, and before he was a creative, he was just a son. And he remembers very clearly, vividly, doing that moment where he did something for his mum for the first time. And almost that scrabbling around in trying to do it, and you're not quite sure how to do it, you want to do it. And all of that was there. And it was a very personal story. I love to hear about that. It resonates with you, Lynne, for that very same reason. But not all of us have had that experience or been there, yet we all resonate with that idea of, we've all been kids with parents and wanted to do something for them. We've all or if you're parents with kids, wanting them to do that, but something we all resonate with. And so this idea of starting with something that's very particular and personal and almost the anecdote, and then trying to find something that is broader. So in Garage, again, Cy Connor created the creative on that. It was his cousin had got a job in a petrol station, and she was working nights, and her dad would go out at 2-3 o'clock in the morning without needing petrol just to see that she's okay. And again, these are stories that resonate because there's a truth in them that's broader than the specifics of that story. And I think that's what we're looking for. We're looking for the people to resonate with the emotional truth. So when before we share them with Gemma, they've gone through so many rounds internally with people viewing them, seeing them, where you're just going, are we getting the feeling? Are you getting the feeling? When we share them with Cadbury clients and present them, and again, that's what you're looking for. Which are the scripts that are getting that feeling? I think it was mentioned earlier today, we know we're not our consumer, so we're writing from personal anecdote and personal stories, but we need to do the checks, take it out to the public, see which of the stories resonate with them. So, we're starting with personal anecdote, but trying to find something very universal, very timeless, which is why I think we can retell the story of Mum's Birthday many years later and it still resonates. We tell these stories around the world, so often we'll make them, they'll run in Australia and in Canada because they have that universalness that we're looking for.
Great, thank you. So Gemma, I know that that feel-good factor is part of your brand's identity, but you need to make sure that Cadbury own that moment. Talk us through some of the steps you go through to get there. How do you make sure it's really authentic?
Yeah, I think quite simply, it's a creative idea. It won't work for us if it's just something that's been brought to you by Cadbury. The creative idea has to work because of Cadbury. So in our scripts, that means that it's not just a lovely emotional story that's brought to you by Cadbury, but you can't tell that story unless the product is part of it. The product actually played a couple of roles for us. There's both a literal role of the giving and receiving of chocolate, and that's the opportunity for us to get our branding in, something that we spend a lot of time working out how we do in a really credible and authentic way and not just shoehorn it in at the first opportunity. But the other role is really on the emotional signifier. It really underlines the generous gesture that someone has gone out of their way to think about somebody else, and whether that is turning up at a garage in the middle of the night to check the daughter's okay and getting her through her shift with a little bit of chocolate, or whether it's recognising a stranger on the bus is upset and giving up your prized bar that the little boy in the on the next one, the little boy on the bus does. It's those moments, those really emotional high point moments that are underlined by the product that really link the two together. And actually one thing that we've worked quite hard on is then actually thinking about the product doesn't actually need to do consumption for us. It doesn't need to do that eating moment, which in a food and drinks ad is quite an anomaly, really, not necessarily to show the moment of eating. But that's because we found that tends to take away from the moment of connection that you've built between two people. You take it into quite a me space of just enjoying the chocolate. And the benefit of having something that's got such predisposition, that's got such associations, is that people understand that intuitively. They already know what the eating experience of Cadbury is like. You can imply that really quickly and easily with just showing someone running their hand over the pack. And that does it much more strongly and powerfully than actually showing the eating product itself. And that gives us more time then in the ads to concentrate on the emotion. The bit that we have to balance very carefully is making sure that we still get the product in to the right degree, and that's where the Kantar research really helps us. We've learned the hard way that even just a couple of extra fraction of a second on dwelling on the purple pack makes a huge difference to the takeout and the levels of branding of the ad at the end. So that's been something that we've really learned over time as to how to refine that balance between delivering the emotional high point but making sure the brand is part of it. Essentially, it comes down to if you can tell the story without the product, then it's not a story for Cadbury.
Brilliant. So we've talked about linking to people's hearts and minds through the kind of stories you tell, through creativity, of course making sure that's attached to your brand. But when you get the real glass and a half effect is when you do that on repeat. So when you get that amplification of lots of individual assets that glue together really powerfully. And I think the discipline that you have as a team is remarkable to stick to that so consistently. So tell us, how do you do that? How do you achieve that as a big team, I would imagine?
Yeah, so a couple of things there, really. I think one is having that real clarity of your brand purpose, and it's something that could be summed up so simply in a word. That really acts as the North Star for the team to rally behind, and it sets a really helpful lens through which to judge the creative. Does it feel right for Cadbury? There's a lot more to than just the one word. There's obviously, it's well codified in the brand books, but it is something that is very simply understood and easy to communicate to a broad team. And then the second thing really is around using the right frameworks and tools. So a couple to highlight from how we build our kind of our core Cadbury Dairy Milk equity. We're very clear on the equity jobs to be done based around meaning, salience and difference, and the metrics that we need to have in place to measure if we're doing that. And then we map our campaigns for the year against those to understand if we are delivering against all the jobs, or if there's anything in there that we're working on that actually doesn't really deliver against those, and therefore it's extra work that we don't need. So that's one. Second really core framework is then around our portfolio architecture and being really clear on how close or far away different brands in the portfolio sit to call Cadbury Dairy Milk, and then how closely they actually need to sing to that generosity tune. So something like a cream egg, for instance, there's a real an acknowledgement and a license that needs to show up and act differently from kind of core CDM, but still in a relevant Cadbury way. Brilliant. So I'm curious, Gethin, to know from your point of view, from a creative point of view, you've got this platform. Does it restrain you, or does it liberate creative teams to do their best work?
I think having clear foundations is not a hindrance, it's more of a head start. So, knowing you've got generosity to start with, it just shortcuts a lot of decisions. So one example I'd use is within season, so Easter, Christmas, there are times of year that a lot of chocolate is eaten. But if you start with, we know we're the generosity brand, how do we show up with that? The first question you ask is, where's the generosity? So I think we're going to play, if we've got time, quickly Easter, and then we'll talk about it very quickly.
Be generous with us.
Wouldn't it be lovely if you could hide an Easter egg anywhere in the world for someone you love? Could be that place where you both went every year, or where you've both always dreamt of going back to. Hide an Easter egg for someone you love. Search Cadbury Worldwide Hide.
if Easter is all about Easter egg hunts, doesn't feel very generous. But then we realise behind every hunt is a hide. And actually, are there ways to make the hiding more meaningful to people? So the worldwide hide, which is, where you choose to hide that egg, can often be a bit of an inside joke between two people, something that no one else could really understand the significance of. For Christmas, it was Christmas season of giving. But where's the real generosity? If you're giving with the expectation of getting something in return, is that generous versus giving without that expectation? And what could be more generous than giving secretly, where the person doesn't even know who you're doing it for? So there's just two examples in a different season, different category entry point of how we take generosity and bring that to life and use that as the starting point rather than a straitjacket.
Brilliant. And I love how those are experiential. So they're really, a lot of deep processing going on there. You're creating enduring memories. I know I found Jeff, Secret Santa in Solihull. I won't forget that. So Gemma, there was one more set of customers who are really important to Cadbury that you wanted to celebrate in this special anniversary year. You can see them on the screen here. The corner shop keeper, who is so fundamental to our lives. So let's have a quick look at what the initiative is, and then you can tell us about the thinking behind it, please.
Our local shops, always here when we need them. Wouldn't it be nice to give something back? Cadbury presents the big win-win. Buy a bar and you could win cash for you and for your local shop.
So I think just to touch on it really quickly, because I'm conscious we're sitting between you and your break, is just to highlight, I think, how the strength of the brand purpose and the brand positioning that we've got to allows us to apply it beyond just the obvious spaces with the TV and the big set moments in the seasons, but really take that all the way through into a consumer touch point in an in-store environment where your canvas is that big on a bar as opposed to that big on a big screen. And it's really been a good acid test of how strong our brand positioning has been in ensuring that we can show up in a consistent way, in a relevant way for that setting, and allows us to showcase and extend our generosity to the retailers who, as you said, has been equally been an important part in our 200-year history. So hopefully a helpful example just to show that you can stretch beyond the obvious places with the right positioning.
I think it's brilliant. It's genius, generous idea. So we've talked about three key things then that you can all go away and do. So making sure you've got the right foundations that spring off what you've already got in people's heads, but keep it relevant, create that meaning today. And then, of course, you've got to bring it to life. So you need to link to people's hearts and minds, tap into the cultural pulse, make people really feel something that's going to stick with them, and make sure your brand is really strongly attached to that. And finally, when you do that on repeat, I like to think of this as glue. All of those encounters need to really stick together, and that's when you get that amplification. That's when you get a glass and a half. You're reinforcing your difference and your meaning, and the return you get, bang for your buck. Thank you very much.